This episode contains discussions of sexual violence, trauma, and systemic injustice. Some content may be distressing or triggering, especially for survivors. Please listen with care and prioritize your well being. Support resources are listed in the episode description below.
Good morning, Pam. Thank you so much for being here for the No Longer Silence podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. We're here to talk about the important work being done to support survivors and intimate partner violence and sexual violence, and how police involvement can make a real difference in these cases. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective and your insights.
Thanks so much, and thank you for the invitation. This is a great opportunity.
So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, and how you really how police presence can really affect change in these situations.
So I've been with Peel Police since 2003. I'm currently assigned to the Intimate Partner Violence Unit, but I also have a background working in the Special Victims Unit, so on child abuse and sex assault investigations as well. And in my role in the IPV office, I supervise a team of detective constables who investigate these incidents in our region.
Okay, so I would ask you then, being so involved in this side of things, what would you say are the best ways that police can support survivors of sexual violence and intimate violence?
So yeah, that's a fantastic question. One of the things that I think Peel does exceptionally well in this area is that we're very collaborative. I think the first response is done by a uniform officer, who our frontline officers do receive training on the sort of questions that they need to ask individuals at a scene to establish whether or not it's an intimate partner violence type of investigation. And once a detective constable from the Intimate Partner Violence Unit becomes involved, I think some of the things that we do well is how we take time to give individuals space to share their information. Like oftentimes these incidents it's not just a one-off, it's a culmination of years of things that they have endured, that have essentially come to a head. So it's really important to make sure that victims feel heard and understood, and that they're engaging with an officer that they trust is really listening to them and identifying what their needs are, so that it's not just, talking to someone and laying a criminal charge. We take a holistic approach in Peel region by working with our community partners, because after that moment of reporting, when the police sort of take a step back, we trust that they're in good hands with community partners like yourself and like the groups that we work with in the Safe Center of Peel to support victims moving forward.
Thank you for that. I will say that Revive does engage with a lot of survivors. That is a big part of the mission, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to just kind of rewind it a little bit, because one of the things that has come up many times in these conversations is that victims need to be believed.
Yes.
And we're talking about making them feel safe to be heard, to share their story, and to feel as they're believed. So I want to rewind it to instance where before the authorities have been called, before law has been called, what can you say to victims that would encourage them to make that call, that would encourage them to feel that, yes, I will be believed and I can be safe in moving forward and making that call?
Yeah. So before they make the call, I mean, everybody's process is different. And I guess, from my perspective and the things that I've observed,
Yes.
It does take a certain strength to kind of open up and be willing to make that call. If you're not ready to, there are organizations in our community that you can meet with to build up that confidence, or to work it out within yourself, how you want to share your story, how you want to come forward. And again, organizations like yourself, if somebody feels like they're not ready to maybe make the call to us and they want to seek guidance and counseling and support, or set up a safety plan in advance because they might not be ready to face that unknown of the first call. Those are things that might make them feel more secure. But I think most of all, I would want people to know that it's not their fault, and that we are here to listen, and that, they will be believed, and we will work with them and our support agencies to make sure that they have the resources, to move forward and to feel confident and to be heard, not just when you're talking to us, because this isn't the end. It's not like you make the call and then it's like, okay, I'm done. I've told my story. There is a second part where we go through the judicial process and making sure that individuals feel supported in that process, because it can be intimidating as well. And so we really want to make sure that we've equipped everyone with what they need to be strong in those moments.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it is really important that a person who's making the call does really feel that they are going to be believed, they're going to be heard. And as you mentioned, officers have training,
Yes.
etc., so they can feel some level of comfort in the responses that they received, in sort of laying out that sort of security that says, okay, as you said, this is not the end of the story, but here you can tell us what you can now, and the process will continue. But having a survivor, victim feel like they can continue past this first step with the process is extremely important. So I'm wondering, typically, that a lot of that continuation of the process is with community agencies, etc., other resources that a survivor or victim will need to feel that support. How does the SVU and the IPU collaborate with such community agencies to guarantee, or possibly not guarantee, but just to increase the chances that the support is being met? That, I'm sure there's sometimes conversations that happen initially with law enforcement that may not happen again. And so how do you collaborate with agencies to keep that going?
So there is our bureau is actually not even based in a division. We're not in a police station. We're not in uniform. We're in plain clothes, and we work literally with a set of stairs separating our offices. So we're in constant communication with our partners every day on multiple cases. So once somebody does report and it gets referred through our process in the Safe Center of Peel, a client navigator works with that individual to determine what their needs are and what support services they might need, whether it's food, shelter, finances. In our office, we even will replace cell phones if there's tracking devices or if they're being harassed, through electronic devices or means. So there's a lot of resources that we will establish in-house immediately as far as ongoing to ensure that those supports are being carried over. Our cases will continue on for several months. And during that time, the officer in charge of that investigation will liaise ongoing with the survivor to make sure that they're informed, that they feel prepared, and we have an open door policy. So if they ever want to call or email or reach out, we are also always available. So while we do shift work, anybody who picks up the phone can provide guidance or support, or if something is lacking or they feel like their needs aren't being met, then we can reach out and reconnect and reestablish those resources and make sure that it is being followed.
That is amazing. The reassurance of follow-up is, I think, a big portion of what allows people to feel comfortable. There's sometimes an idea that if I make it past giving a report, that nothing else will happen. And so just hearing you say that there is follow-up and that's important does make a big difference. With agencies such as Revive and the YWCA, community partnerships really, again, make such a big difference. Still, though, there are often misconceptions. There are misconceptions within the community, for survivors, for victims, about how police involvement plays out. And so, if you could share some of those misconceptions and maybe some of the ways in which you kind of combat
Yeah.
those, that would be
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. So, our investigators, both in our special victims office and in our intimate partner violence, are, trained to understand the impacts of trauma and how
Mm.
that plays out over the course of an investigation. So, it's really important that our investigators, all of them, I mean, they're before they're police officers, they're people first. So building that trust and relationship, and they're here because they want to be here and they genuinely want to help. So some of the ongoing training they receive is very centered around, like, victim centered support and resources, minimizing that re-traumatization of continually repeating your story with different people. It's, you tell us once, and we also understand that maybe in your first conversation, you might have forgot some things, or maybe you don't remember specific dates, and that's not a sign of deceit. It's, that is some of the impacts of trauma, and so it's our job to work with you and make sure that if there are any other witnesses or evidence or things that we can collect to support you along the way, that's all available. So just ensuring that there's that ongoing training, and collaboration with agencies that we know and trust take the same approach. That's our primary, I guess, goal within both of these units, and working with, like you said, organizations like Revive, who have very, I guess, deep roots in the community and a long standing show of investment in these processes too. So
Thank you. I think that a lot of the time, again, it's amazing to hear that there is a lot of collaboration. That's one of the themes of the podcast, is collaborating between law enforcement and agencies, between, agencies and survivors and victims, etc. And I think sometimes, again, people have this misconception of what's going to happen when they, choose to report, when they choose to share their story. I'm wondering, do you ever have, mental health professionals or therapists or counselors or anyone in that sort of area along with the officers when they do respond to these calls?
actually, yeah. So I'm really glad you asked that, because we do have an embedded crisis worker that supports our front line. And so when the intimate partner violence unit started, we initially started with 41 investigators. We've expanded to 61. And then we've also integrated a safe center response team. So their purpose is early intervention on the front line. But as a detective in the intimate partner violence unit, I review all of the IPV or domestic cases in the region that happen on my shift. And if I notice any trends or something stands out to me, multiple calls for like verbals, or a long history of incidents, then I can also engage our Safe Center response team, and they will go with the crisis worker and talk to the family and also connect them to services. And sometimes it's communication and counseling services that they need, or it could be dealing with maybe a child in the home that is struggling with behavioral issues that they need resources for, and the couple are then sort of reacting to this ongoing. So we really try to provide that wraparound care with that support worker to make sure that we're intervening before things go further.
I think that's quite a relief for a lot of people who've had possibly not the most encouraging experiences with law enforcement, and they may be, again, hesitant to call because of something in their past or because of something that they've heard. And so knowing that there's like a bigger picture, a bigger team that comes in, I think that would allow people, again, to feel a little bit more comfortable and then to express themselves a little bit more. I don't think the right word is confidently, but a little bit more securely. And so in our previous conversations, we have been told and we've discussed that intimate partner violence has been declared a pandemic within the region of Peel. Unfortunately, not in all cities like Toronto, but could you talk to us a little bit about that and what the police are doing in terms of, numbers, in terms of how they approach cases, knowing that this is an official pandemic?
Yeah, we're acutely aware of that declaration, and that's
Mm.
one of the reasons why our unit has expanded so greatly, is to meet the needs of the community. It's a number one priority for our organization, and as of, I believe, 2022, the Standing Committee on the Status of Women identified that in the region of Peel, we are an example of a model, a collaborative model for the country. So on a national level, we're setting a standard as to how to approach these sorts of investigations. But it really is, it's not just us, right? We do recognize that it's a more, it's a deeper rooted issue, and just laying a charge is not going to change things. It's, meeting people where they are in the community, providing, even counseling at the high school level with students, and educating them on healthy relationships, communication, and then identifying the needs of each respective community. Peel's exceptionally diverse. It's, if not one of the most diverse regions in Canada. And so, there are those impacts as well that can influence, I guess, how people navigate relationships. So making sure that everyone knows what our expectations are when it comes to navigating a difficult conversation. Raising a hand is not appropriate. It will come down to better communication out in the community. As far as numbers are concerned, I believe there was a 2% decrease in the number of reports. However, the number of charges is still very, very high. So, if the community collaborated enough to eliminate intimate partner violence, and then we can deploy our officers out on the road to do something else, that would be wonderful, because eliminating domestic violence is a top priority, and not just for Peel, but I think nationally.
I think you're absolutely right. Of course, it's an ongoing struggle. It's an ongoing battle. And it is definitely a thing where we need community advocates. We need individual advocates. We need society as a whole to accept that this is actually unacceptable. And that, especially in a place like Peel, which is so multicultural and so diverse, that this is not an issue of that's how their culture does it, or that's normal over here. It's not normal, and it's unacceptable. I'm wondering, though, when cases go forward and the victim doesn't get the result that they would hope for, that anybody would really hope for, how does police continue to interact with that person? Is it sort of a thing where they have to just accept that this is the end result, or is there continued support and a way for them to kind of, maybe outside of what the law could provide, but a way for them to move forward and possibly not give up, really?
Yeah, this was something I really struggled with when I worked in special victims, because when it comes to the judicial process, there are no guarantees with how things are going to unfold. So I think the victory is speaking your truth. And that is where, change is birthed. Once you speak it out loud, and you seek out that change, and you've drawn that line in the sand, we don't walk away after a court process. It's not like, okay, well, we're done. Maybe there wasn't a conviction, or it didn't end how we had hoped. Those resources are still there. And even if you don't report, those resources are still there for you. It's not like there's a hierarchy of, well, I've reported, so I get better access to care. That's not how it works. Care is available whether you report or not. And it's such an independent journey. Obviously, from my perspective as an officer, I think accountability is a huge piece, that someone who offends cannot change without accountability, without acknowledging it, whether it be publicly or seeking support themselves. So yeah, I would say after a court process, you still have full access to resources. We're not walking away. Safe Center Appeal is not walking away. And I'm sure your organization is very much the same, that your doors are open, whether you report or not.
You're absolutely correct. I think, again, that is one of the many powers of collaboration, is that after the process, or at least at that point in the process, there's the opportunity to work together to continue to provide that support, to give advice or whatever it may be to allow a person to move forward. Sometimes I think there are also convictions or outcomes that, again, may not be exactly what a person may have wanted or thought that they wanted in terms of, punishment. We talk a lot about, an accuser being punished, but in this conversation during these podcasts and collaborations, we've talked a lot about rehabilitation. We've talked a lot about sort of the idea of taking responsibility and then working towards betterment. And so I would understand that that also can be an outcome by law. Is that correct? Or is that just something that the accused would have to take upon themselves through maybe their own collaborations in a separate agency where they're getting support for whatever they're dealing with? Is that something that can be issued by law?
Yes. So the Safe Center Appeal does have post conviction support groups to navigate, that rehabilitation education piece. Because, in some of these examples of investigations, people know and learn what they see, and they maybe haven't been exposed to a healthy relationship, or maybe that is something that is more acceptable, historically for them. So it's important to consider that. I think we can't affect any change unless we acknowledge both sides of this situation. Reporting is just one silo. The rehabilitation and education piece and engaging people who offend would be an absolute priority, and it is for the judiciary as well. So I do know that that is part of some sentencing processes.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that will shed light on a lot of people's sort of concerns as to the idea that, well, it didn't go where I wanted to go and now it's all over. But in that same vein, I'm curious, a lot of the time, again, conversations happen where survivors or victims and their accused know each other. And a victim may want to withdraw their report. Is there a time where they may want to do that, but the situation sort of dictates that law enforcement says, we are going to proceed with this regardless? Or is it sort of really up to the person who files the report to have the choice to say, you know what, I'm not going to go through this? Because I say that because I know sometimes there are circumstances where the victim may feel threatened. They may feel unsafe following up. And it's not always a matter of, I know this person, I know their heart, etc. I don't want this to sort of unravel my family. Maybe we can find a new way to deal with this. There might just be some fear involved. So is there times when law enforcement just says, let us take this and we're going to pursue?
So in a domestic violence situation where there is a criminal offense, there is a mandatory charge policy that is a guideline we adhere to.
Okay.
And that comes down to victim safety. I think, that element of, in no other offense I can think of, is there the element of love or affection. So that can make us maybe less objective as to our level of risk, our perceived risk.
Yeah.
However, once a charge is laid, if a victim, what we do is refer them through the court process. So that is something that they would have to proceed with through the courts. As an officer, we are not in a position to withdraw a charge. Once we've gone down that path and once we've determined that an offense has been committed, we are obligated to proceed with a charge. And I can understand from a perspective of a survivor that it may feel like having your power taken away maybe yet again. And I think this is where our community partnerships play such an important role in educating individuals as to, what happens next, and that perhaps that accountability piece can improve their partner in the future, and it does take away risk for perhaps a future partner. I mean, as someone who, if I was out dating and I was engaging with someone who had a history of domestic violence and not being aware, it had not been reported, that elevates my risk too. So, that's one of the reasons why reporting and accountability is so important, because it's protection of the public and that individual. So we do proceed with mandatory charges.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Again, you're sharing with us a lot of information I think that we are curious about and uncertain of. And so we really appreciate having some answers. So I would ask then, with that being said, what is sort of, I guess, a ballpark of the type of volume of handled cases by the SVU and the IPV in terms of managing caseload and maintaining, of course, what we all want is a high standard of care and also, responsiveness. And again, the collaboration, the time to be able to continue with support with other community agencies like Revive and the YWCA.
Yeah. Ugh, numbers are, I wish it was zero. It's not.
Mhm.
In 2024, the Intimate Partner Violence Unit laid just over 7,000 charges, but our organization laid just over 9,000. So approximately 2,000 investigations were carried over by our other bureaus. So that is because of the cases we take on. So if it's over 18, an individual over 18, that goes to our unit. Anybody under the age of 18 would go to our divisional investigators, who are just as well trained and have the same access to care and resources. So yeah, the numbers are significant. As far as this year is concerned, yeah, I can't speculate. I apologize. I don't have the numbers for this year this far, because we're still early on in the year. But yeah, and those numbers are approximately a 2% drop from 2023. So whether or not that's good or bad, I can't say. I mean, any drop is excellent. So, but unfortunately, in 2024, we did have 2 domestic homicides. So, the level of risk in these cases is so significant. So, yeah.
So I would imagine it does become difficult to manage these caseloads and to be able to be, I would say, active, continuously active with individual cases.
Well, we're very lucky. I mean, our investigators, the caseload is distributed amongst our entire bureau. So, and some cases may wrap up sooner than others. Others may be more ongoing. And the number of charges isn't reflective of the number of victims. So in some cases, we might have 10 charges on one investigation. So yeah, the actual number of cases, I believe, is around 6,000, approximately five to 6,000. So, is it perfect math? Perhaps not, but at the end of the day, I do feel very strongly that our investigators are very active with their the individuals that they've worked with, and they are available. We have officers in court every day for these cases, and again, that's why we work so closely with our community partners, because it's not just us. There's a whole building, behind that door, that are also here and in contact daily. So with respect to the case, we work on the case every time there's anything that needs to be addressed. We work very closely with the Crowns, but that's why this collaborative piece that you mentioned is so crucial to what we do, because we can't do this work alone.
Absolutely not. So I would imagine then that it's pretty important to have the conversation with the person that's being represented as to sort of timelines, because it cannot be determined, is what I'm hearing, is that some cases may proceed quickly, some extended periods of time, that there is support through, and whether it's individual officers or agencies such as Revive, YWCA, there is support while waiting it out, because it sounds like there's definitely the possibility of having to wait it out.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. So the court process, I mean, there are standards in court that a matter has to be up for a trial within a certain window. I believe it's about a year and a half. But that being said, a lot of how a case proceeds is, depends on if there's going to be a plea involved. Whether or not that happens, that can expedite the process. If somebody takes a plea and then, that those wrap up relatively quickly. But then when it does go to trial, there's a lot of court prep involved prior to. So well before a trial, an individual would receive a subpoena. So they'll be notified of the court date. They'll be able to ask any questions that they have concerns about. They'll get to meet with someone from our victim witness assistance program prior to review their statement, to refresh their memories. To provide any other additional information that they may have available, and then we will be with them through the court process. So the officer that you dealt with will be present at that court process with you. There are safe spaces for survivors to wait, so they're not sitting in the hallway while the accused party is walking by. We make every
Mhm.
effort to make them feel in control of the things that they can be in control of.
Okay, that is a really big part, I think. Just saying that there are safe spaces for them to wait when they're physically there waiting for the proceedings to take place, because I think that can be another area of fear. You've had the opportunity to share your story, to fill in your report, but you have to see this person again. And I think it can deter people from wanting to proceed because I don't even want to see my accuser again. And while I'm standing there, possibly working on motivating myself to have the confidence to share this story again, there they are. So I think the audience can really appreciate that there is a safe space for waiting outside of the waiting, just for the proceeding to go through, like the court case to go through, where they would have resources with community agencies, where they would have, hopefully the support of friends, family, etc. But that physical presence at the moment, I think, is pretty amazing. I think it would make a great impact. So I know that we don't have that much time to continue this conversation, even though in this short period of time, you have shared so much valuable information with us. I am curious to know, aside from intimate partner violence being declared a pandemic within Peel region, and I believe you would say we could agree positive impacts of that, are there any other community-driven or police-led initiatives that have effectively reduced the rates of sexual violence and intimate partner violence in the region? And if so, what can we learn from these things as a community to continue to advocate?
The most significant thing, that I think in recent years, I think would be the establishment of our partnerships in this region. I know I've said it before, but I'm just so proud of the collaboration that we have here, the national recognition we've received. I think that our region really is a leader in trying to combat and address intimate partner violence, sexual violence. We really do have just the best folks out there that are working hard for our community. And I would just encourage anybody who may have concerns or is in a relationship that they don't feel safe or comfortable with. You're in the right place to receive the best care, and we're here for you. We're here to listen, and when you're ready, we're going to answer that call.
Thank you. Pam, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I would like to just end it on a question of what you are hopeful for the future in these processes, for survivors, for victims, for the police department in terms of addressing intimate partner violence, sexual violence, domestic violence. What are you hopeful to see, or maybe have been seeing, that you are encouraged by?
I'm hopeful to see. I'm gonna turn it over to say men, but I'm hopeful to see men become a big part of the conversation and a part of the change. It isn't a secret that females are predominantly impacted by intimate partner violence. But when I look around my office upstairs and I see I see the officers and I see the partnerships, and I see the investment in trying to connect to change behaviors. That gives me a lot of hope. I think the generation up and coming is so different from what I experienced 20 years ago when I first started. It gives me a lot of hope. It gives me a lot of hope to see how the conversation is changing and how we're all taking responsibility.
That's wonderful. That is very inspiring. I thank you again for mentioning men, bringing men into the conversation. That's been mentioned a few times while we've been having all of these conversations, and it seems to be a very important piece. And so I think that you are leaving us with some inspiration in terms of how we can continue these conversations, how we can continue engaging with each other, and who else to bring in on these conversations. So, Pam, I thank you again so much for your time, so much for your expertise, the information that you shared with us. You dropped some gems that I think the audience will really appreciate, because there's things that we don't necessarily even know to ask. And some of those things you addressed in this conversation. So we really appreciate your time, your effort, and the work that you do. Thank you for being a part of the No Longer Silence podcast.
Well, and truly, thank you for having me. But more importantly, thank you for the work you do, because it's organizations like yours that step into the conversation to be a catalyst for change that are having a huge impact and maybe aren't getting the same kind of recognition. So thank you so much. I know the work you do. I've talked to officers and special victims. I know you're having an impact. And once this recording stops, I would love to continue this conversation with you, because it would be a great pleasure to bring you over to our office to meet with folks and to share a lot of what you guys are doing, because I think it's exceptional, and I'm just glad that you invited me and gave me this opportunity. So,
well, thank you. We feel honored about that, and actually, you know what? That's a wonderful invitation. I am positive that further conversation is going to be beneficial to all parties involved, survivors, victims, us as Revive and agencies that are community-based, and law enforcement as well. Learning from each other, collaborating with each other, talking to each other is really what's at the foundation of helping people not only get through it, but hopefully being preventative at the same time.
yeah,
So we appreciate all of what you've said today, and we look forward to having future conversations with you.
thank you.
Thank you. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.